Welcome into a new BuffStampede Radio. Adam Munsterteiger, the publisher of BuffStampede.com, joined by football analyst William Gardner. His takes are so rich, you might be tempted to call him William Gardner. How you doing?
I'm not sure I followed that one exactly. I was like controversial, rich. I was waiting for something like like chocolate or something rich. To be maybe you spent too much time in Europe, my friend. Got a little bit of
there's a strong possibility that's the case.
Too much fondue or whatever the hell they have in Portugal. What'd you eat over there? Tell us that. Give us a quick tidbit of a trip to Portugal.
So the sardines over there are incredible, and I gotta be honest, I was a little bit hesitant because it comes out with the eyeballs on there, and it's just a little bit different than the way it's served here. But growing up in the United States, I think of sardines as those little fish. Sometimes they come out on your Caesar salad. Over there, they're like full fish, and sardine fishing season had just started over in Portugal, and it was pretty incredible. They love their Italian food over there as well, and so I got to go to a couple places that import their cheese from Italy, and it's a little bit closer than we are here in the United States. Not quite Italy itself, but the Italian food was great. The desserts were amazing, and I would recommend Lisbon to anybody that's looking for a great place to go visit. The architecture was fantastic, but anxious to get back into it. We've got a lot coming up here with summer work starting in camp on the other side of that. Big 12 Media Day this summer as well. And William, we always do the Top Buffs countdown, which is one of my favorite features to do. Before we get into that today, we're actually going to do a transfer draft. We're going to go back and forth and pick the 10 guys that we like from this incoming transfer haul, which this is a pretty big draft board that we have to work from.
Yeah. Your thing made me think about the last time I went to see my brother who lives in Switzerland. We drove down, you drive through a ton of just across the border into Italy. And I had Italian, I had pasta carbonara there, and they don't put peas in it. I'm like, oh, you got Italians don't know how to make Italian food. What the hell is this? But it was pretty amazing. Glad you guys had a good trip.
Yeah, no, it was great. So I first time experiencing, the big time difference. I think it was 7 or 8 hours difference in Colorado. So and then we got sick coming back, but no, it was everything that we hoped it would be. So we even got out to the beach for one day. So we went out to a castle. Yeah, we everywhere you go in Lisbon, you just bump into historical stuff that's been around since the 1700s, and it's different than when you're used to being in the United States, and so that part of it was a new experience for me.
That's like the crazy thing about all across Europe. You're looking at things that are from like 800 AD, or you go into Westminster Abbey and hey, there's the Black Prince. Oh, the real one, the actual guy, and there's Henry VIII's armor, for Christ's sakes,
Yeah,
just crazy.
It is. So the Buffs are slowly reporting. Well, they're not officially reporting until over Memorial Day weekend, but we've seen guys trickling into Boulder, and that kind of prompted me to come up with this podcast idea because there is a lot of talent that's touching down in Boulder right now, and I think some of it gets overshadowed with some of the drama we've had on social media in recent weeks, and some of the defections that came out of spring ball. But this is, I think, going to be a fun exercise for us. What do you see as a difference from this team leading into summer work this year compared to last year?
Well, I think we have somebody touched upon it on one of the threads in the board recently. I think they were being derogatory, actually, saying, hey, they had to upgrade they had to replace all the guys they brought in from last year. Well, and I think so. You go from the Carl Durrell's last roster, which is almost nobody on it, is P5, and then you do the best you can to try to fill it back in. And most of those guys weren't up to the level that you wanted. And so this year we're trying to replace a lot of those guys, and I think we're finally getting that roster. We're at 80, 81 scholarships maybe, and finally getting a roster that is really getting close to what we want in terms of being competitive at the P4 level. And so that's what it looks like to me, is that almost every position, like another running back or two and maybe another linebacker. But I think we're really competitive with some pretty good teams at almost every position this time, which I don't think you could say last time. And I don't think we're stretching or reaching either. Like on the offensive line last year, it was quite apparent that some of those guys were just too damn small, or in BB's case, just didn't have enough length or whatever. But we just really feel like, I'm looking at this list of guys coming in and looking at the eligibility chart, and it just really looks a lot better.
Yeah, you look back, hindsight's always 2020, and I look back to the early days of bringing in transfers, and when it was with Carl Durrell, it was only a handful of guys every year. But we overvalued those guys. It was like, a guy would start one game in another Power 5 program, and you anointed him to be the next greatest thing. And then, it doesn't always work that way. And we did overvalue some guys maybe that transferred in last year, but it feels like this year,
Yeah,
there's so much more proven. There's so many more proven
right,
commodities
right.
that are coming into the program. And then because of all that outside controversy that's going on, it almost feels like this year, from a national sense, this incoming group of transfers is being underrated and
Yeah,
underappreciated.
I think big time. And you think back on those ones under Durrell, and I think the only one that I can think of that really lived up to the preseason hype was Tommy Brown at offensive guard. The rest of them were kind of busts to me. But you look at the guys. I mean, we have guys we're bringing in this year who were highly successful in our conference, for example, last year, So I think there's just some very exciting people that are coming. I think there's going to be, we talked a little bit about doing what are some potential all conference and all America level guys on the team. I think we've got some. Well, we've got two, obviously, but beyond those two, I think we've got some others.
And let's see who we think from the transfer ranks could fit into that discussion. Today's episode is brought to us by Macaulay Capital Fractional CFO Services. Is your business looking for financial guidance and support, but not yet big enough to hire a full-time CFO? Well, we have a solution for you. Hiring a fractional CFO who can work with your business on a part-time basis. You get the benefit of having a seasoned financial expert on your team without the commitment or expense of a full-time hire. And here's the best part. It's likely that a partnership with Macaulay Capital will be a win-win situation, meaning that your business will make more money from the guidance of a fractional CFO than the total cost of partnering with us. For more information or to set up a meeting, please visit MacaulayCapital.com. That's MCCAULEY Capital.com. Let's dive into the draft, William. Do you want to ask Siri for heads or tails? Does that work in terms of determining the first pick?
That'll work fine for me.
Okay. Do you want heads or tails?
And remember, we're not drafting a whole team here. We're just drafting 10 dudes. So don't dog me if I take all wide receivers or something,
Yeah.
I like my little guys, man. There's no damn kickers on here though, so I don't know why we're wasting our time with no kickers.
There's a new walk-on kicker. I don't think he's gonna contend for much of a role this year, but
right. I'll take tails.
Okay. Heads or tails? It's tails. Oh, I got the weather app up here, but it did say tails, and that's you. So I will let you take the first pick. Some good options here.
I'm going to take the guy that I think is going to explode all over the country, and nobody's going to cover him. We already have a plethora of offensive riches, but I'm taking LeJohntay Western. Did you know I was doing that?
The way that you led off there, yeah, because that's who I had number one on my list too. So
yeah.
that's the pick right there. Not only because of how explosive he is as a slot receiver, but he's one of the best punt returners in the country, and that is a very unique skill set. When you have a guy that you think can probably return to for a score this year,
right?
Like those are such momentum changing plays. Remember Isaiah Oliver's punt return for a touchdown against UCLA? That won that football game. And so not only is he going to be such a weapon offensively, I think it's a no-brainer that he's the first guy to go off the board here. And so that's a good pick.
Yeah, and you wonder about, it's like with all the wide receivers we got, what the heck our defense is going to do against us, So that's mine.
That naturally leads me into my next pick, and I'm going to stick at the same position and go Will Shepherd, somebody that was a proven top option at Vanderbilt, has his degree from there, is on campus, and we even saw him go out and work with Shador before he got on out to Boulder, and somebody that is proven it in the best conference there is in college football. So I would have taken Wester, but I think the next best option here is Will Shepherd.
All right, then. Well, I'm going to switch to the other side, and I'm going to take the guy on the other side who I think is going to do the same darn thing because he did it last year against this conference, and that's Chidozie Nwankwo at nose tackle.
What makes him stand out? Obviously, we've talked about him before in terms of what he did at Houston. Was there anything that made him pop off and be number two on your board?
Well, I'm the one that pops off. Remember, you got to watch me when you ask me certain things now. I think partially in terms of just what he did last year against the Big 12 at Houston. And in some of those games, he was just flat unblockable. Plus, he comes here with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and you've heard it. I've heard a little bit here and there. People. He's one of those guys like you think I'm too small. Okay, well, I'm going to show you. I'm going to prove that I can beat anybody in this conference. And he's a legit nose tackle, and I think he's a legit NFL prospect. And I don't think anybody's going to block him. I think he's going to be in backfields, and he's going to be a single. You're going to have to double this guy, which means you're going to have to change your scheme. And what are you going to do with all these other guys we got on the defensive line? So I think Chidozie Nwankwo is the guy on defense that's going to do the same thing as Wester, which is really blow things up.
I'm going to stay on the defensive side of the ball with my second pick, fourth overall pick in our transfer draft here, William. And I'm going to go with BJ Green coming in from Arizona State. He has touchdown in Colorado and 56 pressures last season. He affected opposing backfields quite a bit. And it's interesting. We go back to Jimmy Gilbert a lot because he was the last real elite pass rusher for a full season. And not to take away anything that Carson Wells did or Jordan Dominic had a nice season last year, but it's been a while since 2016 since we've really had that next level pass rusher. And BJ Green seems like he could be that. Now, I mentioned Jimmy Gilbert. BJ Green is like the complete opposite in terms of body type. Jimmy Gilbert was basically looking like a basketball player out there off the edge. Whereas BJ Green's 6'1", 270. What kind of technique would you put him in? Or do you ask him to move around a little bit defensively?
Well, I think it depends on what you're doing on defense. I think if you're, I think he plays with his hand in the ground for the most part. And the other nice thing about him is that he's proven it at our level already again. So, I mean, if you go to 4-man front, you put him outside on a 5 or a wide 5 maybe, or a 7, which is outside of a tackle. And put them on the outside shoulder of an offensive tackle and let them go one-on-one. And more often than not, he's going to win, because I think you've got the big guys that you could put inside, and I think he is a good bet to beat a lot of the offensive tackles we're going to see this year.
All right, back to you. Your third pick.
Well, I'll go with his bookend, which is Samuel Okunlola, which is entirely different body type. Actually, more closer to Jimmy Gilbert, I think. Not quite that skinny, but Samuel Okunlola from Pittsburgh, who another edge, who put up some pretty nice numbers as a pass rusher last year.
All right, yeah, I like that pick. Ran pretty extensively with that first team defense during spring ball. So clearly they like what he's brought to the table and finished last season with Pittsburgh really strong. With my third pick, I am going to go with Preston Hodge from Liberty. Not only did I like what he showed at Liberty last year, being their highest graded player on PFF, but also what he showed this spring, immediately stepping up, being a leader in that room and showing the versatility that he can play nickel back and cornerback. And so it's going to be a case where Travis kind of shadows the top receiver from the other team because Travis Hunter might be, a top 2 pick in the coming draft. So that's not a knock against Preston Hodge because he's going to be a very solid guy that's going to, I think, upgrade that cornerback position from last year when really at times it was kind of a revolving door with different guys there. And Amarian Cooper had moments. Cormani played a little bit in there. Carter Stoutmeyer had moments in there as a true freshman, but you never really felt solid about that group. And I think Preston Hodge makes you feel solid about that group as well as another cornerback we might talk about later.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go with that guy right off the bat because DJ McKinney is going to be my next pick, and what I think is interesting about those two guys is that it lets them play some interesting games with Travis Hunter, and he doesn't have to be just matched up against one wide receiver. You can put him at the nickel, and you can actually match him up against whoever you want to match him up against, and not just whoever goes to that side. So I think it opens up some real possibilities for that defensive backfield to use Travis Hunter in ways that really maximize his talent, because DJ McKinney, coming from Oklahoma State, have played at this level, comes in and gives you a legit starting cornerback opposite of Hodge, and gives you a blessing of riches at that. Maybe that's where you came with the rich thing at the start.
Well, if those three guys stay healthy this year, I feel pretty strongly that Colorado is going to have as good a cornerbacks group, if not the best in the entire conference.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be crazy to go beyond that and say top 5 10 in the country, frankly, with three guys like that back there at defensive back.
Yeah, I like that pick. He was going to be next on my board as well. Since DJ McKinney is no longer there, I'm going to go with Nikhai Hill-Green, coming in from Charlotte, a guy that has showed a lot of maturity in the interviews that he's done. Really super charismatic young man, and fills a need for them. He's a guy that really prides himself on his leadership there. And so Vonta Bentley coming off a strong end of last season, a strong spring ball. You've added another piece there to compete with him. And, I think that's kind of what we thought was going to be the case with Juju Mitchell last year. And Juju Mitchell comes in, plays well for a couple games, gets back in trouble again.
Right.
And there wasn't that depth there.
Right.
That's not going to be an issue with Nikhai Hill-Green. He's going to be an exemplary player in this program, and somebody that I think CU fans are really going to gravitate towards as he's plays with the Buffs and they get a chance to see more of his personality.
Yeah, and again, gives you some options with what you can do with other guys at that inside linebacker position, and I think he really shores up that spot, which was the only weak spot coming out of spring to me. And I think everybody talks about our offensive skill guys and whatever, but I really think that defensively we could be really good this year if it all comes together, depending on how Livingston does with his play calling or whatever. But I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. All right, back to you. Your fifth pick.
Yeah, I can't go any farther without hitting the offensive line. So I'm going to be a little bit surprising here, and I'm going to pick the guy who I think is the best offensive lineman on this team this year, and that's Justin Mayers at guard. And I think Justin Mayers is maybe the most underrated guy on this team right now. Just based on the physicality of his play at UTEP. Obviously, it was a somewhat lower level, but he came in and got that right guard position. As far as I know, nobody challenged him for it throughout the whole spring. Maybe he was left guard. I always, for some reason, I got him thinking of right guard, but he and Tyler.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, I think he was at right guard. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think Justin Mayers, to me, is the best lineman on this team right now, until somebody else steps up and shows it. And to have a guy like that, we haven't had guards like that in a while. Tommy Brown was close, I think. And well, I guess, what's his name that went to Florida State?
Casey Roddick. Yeah.
Casey Roddick was, I guess, at that level, but Justin Mayers is the kind of physical, nasty player that we used to have back in the day with Joe Garton and Andre Giroud, and I just think he's going to be nasty in there and do some great things.
I like that pick. He was next on my board, and William, I don't know how you felt. That was kind of the part of the draft preparation process. It was pretty easy to me, the first 9 guys. And then from there, I liked a lot of guys, and I'm going to like these guys I draft, but it felt like there was a little bit more splitting hairs. But another guy that kind of stood out to me was Deion Hayes, and that's going to be my next pick coming from Pittsburgh because of the experience he had there. He was Pittsburgh's best pass rusher last year. Mentioned the fact that, teams were so successful running the ball against the Panthers last year that he and Okunlolo didn't get as many pass rush opportunities as they wanted to. And so he feels like with his maturity, he can come in and turn some of those hurries into sacks this year and get more of those pass rush opportunities. So we'll see. I mean, Colorado struggled against the run last year as well, so they got to prove that they can do better in that regard. But I like what he's going to bring to the mix as a guy that you can line up on that defensive line.
Yeah, and I'm going to stick with the offensive line, and I'm going to take Khalil Benson, but I gave a lot of thought to Tyler Johnson because I think Tyler Johnson's right up at the same level with those guys, but he didn't play in spring due to injury, so I'm going to set him down. But I'm going to take Khalil Benson at the offensive line. I think he's going to be very solid for us at right tackle. I think he caused our starter last year to transfer because it was clear that he was at a higher level. He's also a guy that can move inside and play guard and could frankly flip and play the left tackle if something isn't going right with Seaton. So Khalil Benson will be my next guy.
Okay. Does that mean you're going to take Tyler Johnson next pick if I don't take him then?
Not necessarily. I don't know. I think I think people don't really pay attention to the linemen the way they do with other positions, and I think there's a lot of.
Well, this year they have though, because Colorado that has been under the microscope. I've never talked more about an offensive line in the last year than I mean, probably I could go like 3-4 years talking about the offensive line as much as I have in the last 12 months.
And there's so many guys that we brought in on that offensive line, and like Owens and Kirkland maybe a year away. Tyler Johnson, I think, is a guy that fights for a starting spot this year. Wyatt Hummel, to me, is a guy most people are going to overlook, and I think that guy can play, and he can play all 5 spots. He might be your backup center. I don't know. So you got all these guys. I haven't even mentioned like Yakiri Walker still fighting for that spot at center and what have you. But they really did a great job bringing a lot. I mean, we're going to have a second team here who would have all been starters last year.
Yeah, that's possible for sure. All right, I'm going to veer away from Tyler Johnson and go with Dallin Hayden, running back transfer commit from Ohio State. Like what we saw from the opportunities he got in out there. And I do expect there to be some competition added to that group at running back before all is said and done. But for now, I think Dallin Hayden is a guy you'd put the strongest odds on to be the lead back in Boulder this year.
Yeah, I think so. Although what we saw from Welch in spring was impressive for a true freshman. But given the fact that Hayden has played some at a place like Ohio State, he's certainly got the ability, and he's certainly been trained properly and should step right in and be ready to go.
All right, we're up to your 7th pick.
I'm gonna go back to the defensive line, and obviously I'm building a run stopping defensive line, and I'm gonna take Torian Carter because I thought he was very impressive in spring and took one of those starting spots, and I think he really lived up. He's another guy that we seem to have almost a pipeline coming from Arkansas with the guys we got last year, guys we got this year, and so I think Torian Carter brings that 310-pound size to the inside of that defensive line. And people I know have talked about one of the things I saw this week was, what are we going to do when we face those, pound and run teams? So what? We got the guys to handle it this year. We got the beef inside, and we got the right linebackers. So Torian Carter to me is part of that mix.
Well, I'm not going to make Tyler Johnson wait any longer. I'm going to take him, a transfer from Houston. And had we going into spring ball, Tyler Johnson might have been the first one pick there. Maybe not. Maybe Mayers would have still been the pick there. But I can't let him fall too far just from the fact that he was banged up this spring. I mean, he was moving around. I don't know how much we're supposed to talk about injuries, but it's not like he was on one of those scooters or something, No. So I think he's going to be back in the mix. And with his experience that he had at Houston, you definitely don't want to screw up his chances of being healthy going into camp by putting him out there when he's not at 100% during spring ball. So still think he's got a good chance to. It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
I mean, the competition is thick now
Well,
on that offensive line.
yeah, and he's so big. I mean, like 320, 325, 6'5", 6'6", and playing on that offensive line in Houston, he was just really kind of dominant. So, we're going to look out there and we're going to see those big, huge linemen like we used to see at CU on a regular basis through the 90s and the early part of the aughts. And so he's exciting to me. I was hoping to see him in spring, but that didn't work out. So, I think there's going to be a lot of competition this summer and into fall camp to determine who those starting five are.
Yeah. All right, we're back to you for the 8th pick of your draft.
And I'm sticking with the big guys, and I'm going to take a guy that really impressed me. Is Anquan Barnes at defensive tackle, and I thought he was very impressive in spring. And he's one of those guys that, man, I think he was I don't know if he was a 4-star or 5-star going to Alabama, but he's got the talent level that if he ever puts it together is going to be a draft pick in the NFL because he's got the size and the athleticism and just really started to look like he was getting it together in practice this spring. So that's who I'm taking, another guy from Alabama, and hopefully he is even better than Tommy Brown.
So with my 8th pick, and this will be the 16th pick of the draft, I'm taking the number 1 ranked recruiting prospect out of the state of Louisiana from 2 years ago. It's pretty crazy that we got this far in it before, a guy like Quincy Wiggins gets picked, just kind of highlighting, that would have been, he would have been the toast of the town 3 years ago. Right.
Right.
And I get that he didn't put up monster stats his first year at LSU, but this is still a very talented young man that to get this far in the draft before we get to him is again pretty telling.
Right, telling about the increase in talent on the team, and he's another guy like Anquan Barnes that if the light goes on, it all comes together. He could actually beat out a guy like BJ Green or something like that. He's got the, with that length at 6'5", 270, 265, something like that. He's got that prototype NFL defensive end size. And so if it really comes together for him at some point, he's going to be a guy you can't keep on the sidelines either,
Yeah. All right. We each have 2 more picks in this transfer draft. And there's still some intriguing names on the board, William.
Yeah, it gets a little tougher now at this point, I think. And I think I'm going to go. I think I'm going to go with Savion Riley at safety.
Yeah, that's a good pick. He ran with he was splitting reps on the first team defense in Miami this year, played at Vanderbilt prior to that. And, obviously you feel good about what you have with Shiloh and Cam Craig back there. That is a position guys get banged up or there's targeting. Right. And so to bring in a guy like Savion Riley is big. And with my pick, I'm actually going to go with the guy that is most likely to be the starting tight end this year, Sam Hart, coming in from Ohio State. He's not going to be like Mikey Harrison in the sense where he's going to score a couple touchdowns and be a deciding factor late in the game as a mismatch in the passing game, but he's going to be a very physical tight end that can make some plays in the passing game. He's a more of a traditional tight end and played a little bit at Ohio State and is a guy they feel is going to add something with that experience. It's not a position that is probably going to be featured a ton. It took some plays in that spring game before we saw the tight end run out there. But Sam Hart right now looks like he is most likely guy to fill that role.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be an upgrade over Harrison in both facets of the game. I mean, certainly the guy's got talent. He played at Ohio State and was a good pass catching tight end coming out of high school. The fact that he didn't catch a bunch of balls at Ohio State, who knows what their play calling was like, but I think he's a guy who gives you everything you want in a tight end, which is solid blocking, but then you don't have to take him out and dictate and show to the defense that you're going to throw the ball, because I think he can find those spots just like Harrison did, find those holes in the defense and make those 15, 20-yard catches, or, down the red zone where a tight end can be a real weapon. So I think I agree with that. I think he's going to be a much bigger aspect in the passing game than people think he's going to be.
All right, your last pick. Who are you going to
right.
take?
Well,
Got to get the Jeopardy theme music playing here.
right. Dun, 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 dun. And I think I'm going to stick with that safety position and take R.J. Johnson from Arkansas.
He was next on my board. I like that pick. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another one of those that I think people would have been really excited about 3 years ago. And there's so many new guys coming into the program that it's hard to keep track of it all. And some of them kind of slip a little more under the radar now than they used to.
Right. Yeah. And I think him, him with Riley gives us a 4 deep at the safety position, with 4 guys that can play. And if Trevor Woods can move back there, if he's not needed so much, a linebacker could fit in there as well. But I think what we've brought on defense is the ability to have different options and different packages and put guys in roles that fit their particular abilities better. So I really like a lot of the guys we brought in at various different positions on the defense, and I think it's going to give us opportunity to really do some things.
I had Johnny Cheney Jr. from Florida A&M next on my list, but I like his potential at that linebacker group. And because you rotate guys more often on the defensive line, I think I'm actually going to switch up a little bit here and go with Rayon Buell from Ohio coming in. Somebody that can play multiple techniques on the defensive line. I don't know if he's going to be a starter for them per se, but is a guy that will be part of that rotation. And I know that our guys that rate the transfers, that look at all the film from behind the scenes stuff from Huddle, the all 22s, like they love his potential. So I'm going to go Rayon Buell as my last pick.
And I think that we, left a lot of guys that we didn't mention that are going to have an impact on this team. So it's a pretty good, solid class of transfers, I think, and across the board, across a wide variety of positions.
Yeah, what do we have? We've got like 15 other guys that we didn't even draft. That's crazy. More than that.
You carry Walker, who we, people talked about as a potential starting center and played very well last year at UConn. We touched on some of those other guys, but there's some talent. Some of these guys can play, I think.
And even the guys that didn't get drafted, so many of them were blue chip recruits coming out of high school.
Yeah.
And they're just a couple years removed. And it's just crazy. No one, I don't think players or coaches really seem to have patience anymore. And so, just because you're a blue chip coming out of high school, it might take still a couple years, especially as an offensive lineman, if you're Peyton Kirkland or Zach Owens. And so, again, these are guys people would have been doing backflips over before.
So I think, and that goes to the development down the road of guys. It's hard to say whether anybody gets developed anymore or do they just hit the road after a season or two. But we've got a variety of guys like on that offensive line. They're not obviously the junior class is heavy, but we got some younger guys in there with Kirkland and Owens and Seaton and Adia. So I think we've done a really good job of filling up our roster this off season, and people can make all the comments they want about it, but what remains now is to put them together as a team and see them get some chemistry and play together.
So beyond Shedeur and Travis, who are the legit all-conference candidates as you see things as they go into summer workouts?
Well, I think I think there's some guys on that offensive line that legit could be at that level. We'll wait and see who the starters end up being. But like a Mares could be a guy like that at offensive guard. Certainly to me, Nwankwo in the middle of the defensive line, Torian Carter possibly, did well before this. BJ Green, clearly, I think, as a guy, he was all conference in Pac-12 last season. Why wouldn't he be this season? So, looking at on my list here. Um,
Obviously, LeJontay Wester is somebody,
right,
especially as a punt
right.
returner.
Well, and
Will Shepard.
LeJontay Wester could quite frankly be an All-America candidate as a punt returner, maybe even as a wide receiver. So I don't know, as you kind of roll down. Obviously, we didn't mention Shadur and Travis because that's should be go without saying and a no-brainer. Charlie Offerdahl, got to throw that out there, right?
Well, how about Mark Vassett? All joking aside.
Well, yeah, for sure. So he could actually, be all American potential, all conference potential for sure. Shiloh, I think, has all conference potential at safety. Silmon Craig probably does as well. I think either one of those cornerbacks we talked about in the draft, Preston Hodge or TJ McKinney, could rise to that level. So I don't know. BJ Green, Okunlola, possibly. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of guys in there who could rise to that level of all conference. There's not enough to have been seen yet, I think, with a lot of the linemen to say one way or the other. Jimmy Horn Jr., if he improves on his season from last year, is an all conference candidate, I think, still. He's kind of been forgotten this spring with all the big names coming in, but if he ends up being the third weapon on your offense, man, if he's getting covered by a linebacker or whatever, safety or whatever, he could really do some things. So I think there's quite a bit of talent on this team.
Before we close out the podcast, William, I know you got to get going here in a second. Curious, who's your biggest sleeper on this roster? What we can do in offense and defensive pick here.
I'm going to go with the two guys I picked. I think Justin Mares and I think Anquan Barnes. I think just based on what I have a suspicion that Anquan Barnes really puts it together this year. And if he does, he could be a guy on the defensive line who's just a difference maker in games. And I think, people are so, they don't have patience. It's like, well, a guy didn't live up to it for his first year or two at Alabama. He must not be any good. And I don't think that's true at all. And then, I was raving about Justin Mares before, and I just think he's the kind of physical, big offensive guard that we haven't seen in a long time. And I know people, when you say sleeper, people want to see guys are going to have all kinds of stats and what have you, on offensive line are going to have stats, but that's the guy that comes immediately to my mind. Yeah, a lot of the other guys on offense, like you can't call LeJontay Wester sleeper because everybody thinks he's going to do something, So
yeah,
maybe sounds kind of odd, but Jimmy Horn Jr. might be a sleeper given all the talent coming in.
See, I was going to go sleepier than that. I was going to go Wyatt Hummel, who you mentioned from Villanova. Yeah. He's 6'6", 315. So he's got the size.
Right.
Didn't give up any sacks last year, only allowed 3 pressures. Now it's at Villanova. How does that translate? This is the thing that's different about this offseason than last year. These, like, Wyatt Hummel was kind of like the guys that they were bringing in mostly across the board, with a few exceptions around here and there. Sabian Washington played a little bit higher level, but they were banking on these guys making that big jump. They're not banking on Wyatt Hummel to be a starter this year, but they're bringing in Wyatt Hummel to compete. And it wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden Wyatt Hummel is part of the discussion there, or if injuries start happening. There were, I think, 20 programs that offered him when he was in the transfer portal.
And he's in his last season, so he needs to make something happen or he's done with the game.
Yep, got a sense of urgency. And then so defensively, again, staying very sleepy with this one, is cornerback Ivan Yates coming in from Furman. Again, 6 foot 180. He's got power 4 size.
Right.
I think that's kind of the issue that Rod Ward has had coming over and trying to make it in the NFL, is just not quite to that prototypical size, and that's a different position than corner. But Yates has got that size and started a lot of games there. And again, I don't think Evan Yates is going to be starting at cornerback. But when I think sleeper pick, it's somebody that maybe has a role or steps up when injuries happen that maybe some folks didn't think would happen. And again, both those guys you mentioned eligibility, there is that sense of urgency there. And now it's important that they're sleeper picks, those two guys, as opposed to the first two picks of our transfer draft. And that is an example of really good roster management that has kind of got, again, a little bit overshadowed that not every one of these transfers that comes in is going to work out, just like every recruit you bring in from the high school ranks is not going to work out. But they have increased competition pretty much across the board. And then you could kind of make the argument about running back and how that looks. But other positions certainly look a lot better now.
Well, I think every single, I've been watching college football since 1978, and every single year, there's a handful of guys that come out of nowhere that nobody expected to be the guy, and they end up being one of those guys. It happens every single year. So, like, we're talking sleepers, and there will be guys that we haven't even mentioned today who will explode and become, one of the stars of this team. Mikey Harrison, I guess, from last year would be a guy, nobody figured he'd have a role preseason, and look what he ended up doing. So, another guy who might be a sleeper is Shane Cokes, quite frankly. It's kind of forgotten about him, including me. Shane Cokes was a guy who was far more effective last year than people thought he was, and he's one of the reasons why the guy that got all the sacks for us, Blanken, the edge player.
Jordan Dominic?
Jordan Dominic. A lot of times you see Jordan Dominic getting to the quarterback, and one of the reasons is because Shane Cokes tied up a couple of guys, and Shane Cokes being able to play in a more natural position since we got some more big guys inside, he could be a guy that blows up and really does something this year too.
Yeah, no doubt. Yes. I mean, there's other guys that we didn't even talk about, like you said, Jalen Lester, Herman Smith, Taufik Thomas.
And I know we're talking mostly transfers, but quite frankly, I just saw his name on the eligibility chart. I want to change my vote because my sleeper guy is Tajay McCoy.
Okay.
Because that kid is a player, and he came as a true freshman last year, didn't get a lot of playing time, but he always stands out in practice and always does something. I think he's going to be a true pass rush talent. So he's another guy that could really explode on the scene this year too.
Yeah, and he took advantage of those extra reps he got this spring. So he's starting to get a little bit more seasoned, at least in terms of practice. All right, William, I know you got to get back to your day job, but I appreciate you for doing this. This was a fun exercise, and it was good to kind of dive back into this whole group of transfers for it to sink in about, okay, they really have upgraded the roster yet again during this transfer window.
Right. And I think, like when now we're going to all do our top 40, I think it's going to be a lot tougher this year as we get into that second of guys, we're going to have to leave some guys off our top 40 this year who could play, which says that we're finally starting to get that roster back to where we want it to be. So that's a lot more fun this year.
It is a lot more pressure too, but that's what you want, I guess, that we haven't had that around here.
Yeah. Like a couple 3 years ago, doing that top 40 was like, oh, Jesus, man. I got to put this soup can in there somewhere, and here's a tomato can, better put that in there somewhere. And I'm not sure I can find 35 through 40.
Yeah. It again, exercises like this draft put things in perspective a little bit. So I appreciate you coming on and doing it, and appreciate everybody out there.
Well, and appreciate you for the updates on the sardines in Lisbon. Need to know things. People hopefully got notes on that. And I think what's our guy on the board, Boyd, who lives over there in Spain or something.
He used to. He's back in the United States now. He's actually going to be mentioned that he's going to be able to make it a Folsom Field this year for the North Dakota State game. So that's cool.
Nice.
It's tough. I mean, that time difference is no joke if you're having to try to stay up with sports back in the United States.
Right.
I mean, I was watching some of the Celtics games because I'm a Celtics fan, and they're coming on over there, and that's the early game starts at 12:30 in the morning.
Yeah. It's a whole different world. So I don't know. All right, I got to run.
All right. We appreciate you, William, and I appreciate everybody out there for tuning in.